by Velikovsky's challenge that the solar system had electromagnetic forces to be taken into account. And one of the early pioneers in addressing this issue of are comets an electrical phenomenon was Ralph Jurgens. When he proposed the electrical model of the sun, it implied that all bodies in the solar system must have, to some degree, a cometary appearance or a cometary effect associated with them. Ralph Jurgens, in his model of the sun, showed that bodies moving radially towards or away from the sun would experience electrical forces which could induce a cometary display, that is, a visible display. Also working in later years with Ralph Jurgens was Dr. Earl Milton, and he made some predictions and statements about the impact of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 fragments with Jupiter. And his view of the electrical nature of those impacts was also vindicated. In the electrical model of the solar system, anybody moving away from or towards the sun at any great rate, for example like a comet, will experience electrical effects which result in a cometary appearance, and that could apply to a planet. Now Velikovsky, in his research, found that Venus was described as a stupendous comet at some point in ancient times. So it was very gratifying for him to be able to announce at the conference in 1974 that astronomers had discovered what they called a cometary tail of Venus. Some years later, it was announced that it was discovered that stringy things were coming from Venus. And of course, this was confirmation to the electrical model because plasma currents flow in strings. This discovery of a cometary aspect of Venus raises the issue of the intense heat we find on Venus. That intense heat is not well explained at all by any idea that the planet is somehow a twin of the Earth's. It raises the distinct possibility that Venus has had a far more dynamic history than we've been taught.
Our ancient ancestors were obsessed with the comet. Let the slightest wisp of a comet appear in the sky and all of humanity was thrown into terror. But why was this? It was cosmic catastrophe that inspired the ancient words and phrases for the comet. The comet was the torch of the sky, the sword hanging over the world, the spiraling serpent or dragon, the spiraling sidelock or ribbon. The angry or lamenting goddess soaring across the sky, her hair disordered and blowing in the wind. Anyone exploring the roots of the ancient comet fears is going to run into the work of Immanuel Velikovsky, the controversial theorist who suggested that, well, there's a reason for the fears of comets around the world. We experienced this horrific cometary catastrophe. The world was devastated by a comet just a few thousand years ago. And Velikovsky went further. He said that not that long ago, planets appeared in the sky with comet-like attributes. In particular, he named the planet Venus as the great comet of antiquity. Both Wal Thornhill and I disagreed with many components of Velikovsky's reconstruction, but we also felt that Velikovsky had nailed certain principles that can help us to understand the early cultures. In particular, Velikovsky was correct in naming the planet Venus as the Great Comet. And the cometary language of Venus goes far beyond anything that Velikovsky himself published. In every corner of the world, the language of the comet and the language of Venus are identical. Venus as serpent or dragon. Venus as torch of the sky. Venus as long-haired star. Venus as bearded star. The Sumerian goddess Inanna was identified as Venus. She was the Lady of Life. But in her terrible aspect, she became a dragon-like flame in the sky. The texts say, like a dragon, you have deposited venom on the land, raining the fanned fire down upon the nation. Inanna became a roaring storm. She devastated the land. Mankind comes before you in fear and trembling at your tempestuous radiance, the texts say. Inanna's Babylonian counterpart Ishtar was also identified as Venus. She was the shining torch of heaven and earth. Furious and irresistible onslaught. I rain down like flames, the goddess announces. The Egyptian goddess Sekhmet has the same attributes. She takes the form of the fiery Uraeus serpent. She becomes a flame of fire in her tempest, a star scattering its flame and fire. Sekhmet herself says, the fear of me is in their hearts, and the awe of me is in their hearts. No one at all can approach her, the coffin texts say. The streams behind her are flames of fire. The astonishing fact is that goddesses everywhere exhibit this terrifying and cometary aspect. The Canaanite Anat, the Hindu Kali and Durga, the Greek Aphrodite, Athena, Medusa, and countless others. And of course, you can add numerous counterparts in the New World, from the Incan goddess Chaska to the Aztec goddess Xochiquetzal to the legendary Nokomis of North American Indian tribes. The serpent or dragon is an unexplained mythical archetype. There's nothing like it anywhere in the biological world. And yet the same recurring features will be found in cultures the world over. The dragon's disheveled hair and shaggy beard. Its knotted aspect, and its worldwide appearance as entwined twins. Its fiery or lightning-like emanations, and its effusive feathers. In all of the ancient serpent or dragon images, it's the luminous, filamentary, braided, spiraling, metamorphosing, and destructive aspects that stand out, the very traits of high-energy plasma discharge. The attributes of these mythic monsters remain unexplained only until we see the hairy and feathery attributes of the electric arc in the laboratory. We see precisely the same thing in enhanced images of the comet's tail. And we see the same thing in the comet-like discharges of distant nebulas. Gases in a vacuum don't behave this way, but electrified plasma does.
The recent discoveries about the comet have astonished astronomers.
Are comets an electrical phenomenon was Ralph Jurgens. When he proposed the electrical model of the sun, it implied that all bodies in the solar system must have, to some degree, a cometary, that is a visible display. Also working in later years with Ralph Jurgens was Dr. Appearance, or a cometary effect associated with them. By Velikovsky's challenge that the solar system had electromagnetic forces to be taken into account. And one of the early pioneers in addressing this issue of Ralph Jurgens, in his model of the sun, showed that bodies moving radially towards or away from the sun would experience electrical forces which could induce a cometary display.